Okay, so our rules of exponents, and I probably should have added this onto the other video, but I didn't. All right, so the rules of exponents, remember, just says let a, b, x, and y be real numbers with a greater than 0 and b is greater than 0. So we had those rules that when you multiply with like bases, you're just going to add the exponents. And when you divide with like bases, you subtract the exponents. Then we have what they call power to a power right here. So these two exponents, you have power to a power, you're going to multiply the powers. 0 exponent, the answer is 1. Doesn't matter what your base is, okay? It could be 1 trillion to the 0 and your answer is still 1. And then the one we talked about in example 1, if you have that negative exponent, send it to the bottom and now you have a fraction. When you cross that divide line, remember that fraction line there, it changes the sign of the exponent. So if it's negative, you send it to the bottom, it becomes positive. If it's negative on bottom, you have to send it to the top so it'll become positive. And then the one that I skipped over down here on the bottom left, says a times b to the x. If what's inside, we kind of hinted on this one on example 1 as well, if what's inside is being multiplied or divided, not added or subtracted, you can take the exponent and you can give it to all the pieces. And so therefore we'd get a to the x times b to the x. All right, so keep going here. We're going to talk about, we're going to look at example 2, which is where we start graphing. And so it says graph the exponential function f of x equals 3 to the x. So we're going to make ourselves a table for the 3 to the x. Now the thing about exponentials is that their bases can change. So unlike when we did quadratics in class, or we did cubics or linears or absolute value, any of them, we don't have just one parent table for that function. This will have different parent tables based on what your base is. So this one's based on obviously a base 3. Excuse me. But they're all going to start out the same way. You're going to use the same x values. So some good x values to use are negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. And we're also going to have to remember that horizontal exponential functions have a horizontal asymptote. And their horizontal asymptote is going to be at y equals 0. Because we can't take 3 and raise it to any number and end up with a negative number. So our graph will always be, for the parent function without the transformations, it'll always be up above the x-axis. All right, so I'm going to start these out working from the bottom of my table up. So when I plug in the 2, I get 3 squared, which is 9, 3 to the first, which is 3, 3 to the 0, which is 1, 3 to the negative 1, well, that's that negative exponent rule, so that's 1 over 3 to the first, so that's just 1 over 3. And 3 to the negative 2, well, that's that negative exponent rule, so I get 1 over 3 squared, which is 1 over 9. So I'm going to come over here, and I don't have my x and y lines on here, so I'm going to have to put them. All right, so there's my axes. So we're just going to graph these. First thing I like to do is I like to go ahead and graph my asymptotes. So it's kind of hard to see, but I'm marking it on top of that x-axis there. And then I'm going to plot my points. All right. And then we just get to play connect the dot with them. And put arrows on both ends. But be careful, don't let your graph really touch or cross that horizontal asymptote there. And so there is the graph of that function. All right, so what if we sketch a graph of y equals 1/2 to the x? Well, it's a new parent function. So now I'm doing 1/2 raised to the x. And so I'm going to pick some x values and plug them in. I'm going to pick the same x values. And so if I start at the bottom, I get 1/2 squared. Well, that's 1 squared over 2 squared. So I get 1/4. 1/2 to the first, well, anything to the first is itself, so just 1/2. 1/2 to the 0, well, 0 exponent, the answer is 1. 1/2 to the -1. Well, I'm going to give that -1 to the 1 and to the 2. So now I've got 1 to the -1 over 2 to the -1. And so negative exponent on top, I'm going to send it to the bottom. Negative exponent on bottom, send it to the top. So 2 to the first over 1 to the first. So 2 over 1, which is 2. And then 1/2 to the -2. Well, that's 1 to the -2 over 2 to the -2. So same thing. Negative exponent on top, send it to the bottom. Negative exponent on bottom, send it to the top. So we get 2 squared over 1 squared. So 4 over 1, which is 4. And since this is a parent function, I still have that horizontal asymptote at my y equals 0. So I'm going to draw in my x and y axis here. And I'm going to plot those points. So again, I'm going to draw my graph, not crossing that horizontal asymptote. And so there is my graph. All right, so some properties of exponential functions. You know what, I'm going to stop the video here and I'll start the next video at this place because I don't want the videos to be too long for y'all.